Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. Welcome back. We've got another episode of the Freight 360 podcast here. This is going to be a fun one, Ben. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have Ryan Joyce on with us from GenLogs. We'll get to him in just a second. If you're brand new, make sure to check out all of the other content. We're up to episode 271 this week, so that means there's 270 others. Check out the website, freight360.net, for those podcasts, as well as all of our other content, downloadable stuff for you guys, some sample contracts, dispatching checklist. All of our videos from YouTube are embedded in there too. And you'll also find Freight Broker Basics. That's our educational course as an option. And share us with your friends. We know you guys have been doing that because we've been growing. We're getting lots of questions in, people signing up for the newsletter. We appreciate that. Ben, what's going on in Florida today, man?
It's funny. I just realized, I'm like, we've been doing this for over 5 years. I'm like, in my head, I always feels like it's like 2.5 or like between 2.5 and 3.5. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, because we do one of these every week. We don't ever do more than one podcast a week. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, we have been doing this for more than 5 years now.
Yep.
Anyway, it's supposed to get cold down here this week. In fact, I'm super excited because I grew up north, and the one thing that I miss the most is being able to have a fire. And in our new house, we have a fireplace. So they came and cleaned my chimney out this morning because it's supposed to drop into like at least the low 50s, maybe like 40s this week, which I know isn't crazy cold for you up there, but I'm like super excited to be able to actually build a fire.
Oh, the special things in life, right? Small victories. Well, good deal. I wanted to give a brief intro to Ryan here. Ryan with GenLogs, if you don't mind, just real quick for any of those out there who are maybe just hearing about GenLogs or maybe have seen you on social media, just a quick rundown on who you are, and we'll break down your full history in a little bit here, but just a quick intro.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, let me just say it's great to be on here, guys. I really do credit a lot those 270 episodes. I think not only I've listened to all of them, but everyone on my team has. Mostly because my team does not come out of the freight industry. So I'm kind of always in awe for those who do. The kind of subtitle on GenLogs were freight intelligence. And freight is really what we're getting up to speed on. Intelligence is what we have a deep background on. We'll get more into that here in terms of my background coming out of the intelligence community and how we're leveraging a lot of those principles, applications, and lessons learned to looking at how freight moves around the US. So I'm thrilled to join you here today. And Nate, I expected you to be beaming a whole lot more, man, with the Bills win over the weekend.
We're going to talk about that right now. I try to keep my smiles tame and in check.
Man.
But yeah, so we'll get right to sports here. Big weekend for Ben and myself. Ben's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm a Bills fan. So in Orchard Park at home, the Bills had a nice 30-21 win over the Chiefs. It's a regular season game. The Bills have beat them in the regular season before, and I'm trying to treat it that way because at the end of the day, once you get to the postseason, that's what really matters. And we know the Chiefs' record against the Bills in the postseason. But feeling pretty good that we were able to go out there and really just have a strong game. And Josh Allen with like a 26-yard fourth down run into the end zone. Man, it was electric. So, and Ben, how about Russ Wilson, the Steelers, just hanging out on top of your division, man?
Thank God for Chris Boswell kicking 6 field goals. Still haven't really been able to do much in execution in the red zone, but definitely looked good. I mean, was really happy with obviously that game and that win. You know what I wanted to ask you too? I heard in the news this morning they were talking about the Bills Mafia and Kermit the Frog. Was that, or did you hear that? No?
I didn't hear anything about it. It's probably something with the tailgates, though.
Yeah, it was something with the tailgates and a reference to, I think, Patrick Mahomes and like Kermit the Frog.
Yeah. Everyone says that Pat Mahomes talks like Kermit the Frog. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything specific beyond that, but I mean, he kind of does. If you listen to him in like an interview, he kind of sounds like Kermit the Frog a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And I don't know what happened, but they were talking about it on sports radio this morning. I don't know what they did at the tailgates, but apparently there were some Muppets there and people were very offended at whatever they did with them.
Yeah, I saw plenty of provocative tailgate videos across social media today. So, yeah. Ryan, who's your team? Because you're from the DC area, right?
I ended up in the DC area. I grew up in a Navy family, so I was a Chargers fan for a little bit. I was a Dolphins fan for a little bit. I was a Patriots fan, admittedly for a little
Ooh.
bit. But I knew. But now, yeah, Commanders fan, and it's a good season to be a Commanders fan. Some like stumbles recently, but still a winning record. Which like an actual Washington fan, that's like winning the Super Bowl these days. If we just sneak by with a winning record.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mike Tyson fight. Did you guys watch that on Saturday or on Friday?
It was a travesty. I don't think they ever should have let it happen, to be honest. He had no business being in the ring. He couldn't stand up. Like, he had a hard time literally standing up for the 8 rounds.
I think my favorite part, my wife and I were watching it, and it was so choppy. Like everyone was talking about buffering, and it would like the signal would cut out. Literally, it was blurry, and then it comes back on, and it's like a picture of Tyson's ass walking through the locker room after his son like interviewed him on something, and that might have been the highlight of the entire thing. Yeah, I thought honestly, I thought the better fight that night was the women's right before it, where the girl
What do you
was
think about
Katie
that?
Taylor like destroyed like well. It was
She looked
controversial
like
if they
she
called her the
definitely
winner, but
lost.
yeah, I didn't think she should have been called the winner there, but she, what it happens, right? That's Serrano girl, Amanda Serrano, like her eye was gonna fall out, but she fought like hell. So that was a more entertaining fight in my eyes.
Yeah, the fight before that was pretty good too. Barrio, the bigger guy, I think it was a draw, right? Mine went out right at the decision, and I read it
Yep.
and I couldn't. But like that was a very good fight. The other thing too, like the commentary again, like I thought was terrible. Like only thing I remembered sticking out in my mind, they're like, she's Katie Taylor, the undisputed champion in a disputed decision. I'm like, what? I'm like, it just, I don't, the whole thing I think was actually pretty poor outside of that fight.
Yeah, it didn't look like it was like I feel like Jake Paul could have went to town on Tyson and didn't. I will say the one thing the ending, little glimmer of hope, or I guess silver lining, is like the last 5 seconds. Jake Paul backs up, kind of like bows to the champ, like, "Hey, you're the GOAT." Little sign of respect there, but whatever. It seems like it was more of a publicity stunt than
Yeah.
an actual boxing match, even though it was it's legit. So it's gonna go down in the books.
Yeah, I
But
can't believe that's
I
on
don't
his
know.
record. I can't believe it was sanctioned. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. News. If you guys aren't subscribed to the newsletter, please do so. It comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. One of the big things, we'll just hit on this real quick. This Uber freight broker access thing. You see that?
Oh,
They're basically
yes.
like, yeah, you could use our capacity as a service now. Like Uber's a
Oh,
broker.
we have a
They
name for
have
that.
their carrier network, and you can access Uber Freight's carrier network. So it's like, hey, they're literally advertising double brokering,
Correct.
without like at least address the elephant in the room. Say like this is a co-brokerage agreement where you can lean on our capacity, and somebody in their marketing department just isn't thinking to like talk about that because now everyone's like beating them up on social. Like these guys are literally advertising double brokering. And Ben, you and I have talked about it before. There are legitimate, smart ways to share capacity with other brokers as long as you do it legitimately, transparently, and under contract. And none of that seemed to be part of their message that went out. So, which I'm
And
sure
I-
that's their intention. But in an
Agreed.
era of ridiculous amount of fraud, you'd probably want to be top of mind with that. So,
And I also don't think it's really in the best interest of any freight brokerages out there to assist Uber in growing. I mean, like,
yeah, yep.
that's just me though.
But all right, well, let's talk GenLogs. Ryan, I'm excited to get you on here. Ben and I have known you for quite some time now. Take us through. I want to start with your background because that's when you guys first reached out to us a couple years ago. I was like, did this dude just say he was in the CIA? And obviously, like, that kind of like piques your interest. But take us through kind of your background and how you got to the place where you are now, as far as the company GenLogs, what you guys are doing with it. But just give us a quick background.
Yeah, I mean, if we back up all the way, and I say all the way to really Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, I was a senior in high school at the time, and we were living in the Washington, D.C. area. My dad he used to be a fly F-14s, the Top Gun
Oh
fighter
yeah,
jet there.
Tomcats. Yeah.
Yeah, Tomcats. There's a cool story that goes into his background there. I'll tell it another time, but the bottom line is he was at the Pentagon. I was in class and saw the plane hit the World Trade Center, then the second tower, and then all of a sudden the camera panned over to the Pentagon where there was now just a gaping hole. And I had just visited my dad's office a few weeks prior. It had just recently been re-renovated. He was in there, he showed us around, gave a tour of the family. And now I'm looking at a gaping hole where I knew that my dad was working. And thank God he narrowly escaped with his life that day.
In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the country. You'll get real-time rates on every lane so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
But for me, I woke up that day and I really only cared about 2 things, and that was playing basketball after school and probably flirting with some girls. And I went to bed that night absolutely determined to do everything that I could to learn about the history, culture, language, religion of the people who would do that, and then do everything I could to make sure that would never happen again. It just completely changed the course of my life for sure. And fast forward, the next year, I'm off at university. I enroll in a night class to learn the Arabic alphabet, start study abroad in the Middle East in Egypt. And then a few years later, I end up getting recruited by the CIA to join and start to focus on doing counterterrorism operations throughout the globe. And I spent a lot of my time in the Middle East, work there. My job was to recruit foreigners, specifically those that were, or I guess, Al-Qaeda operatives, to provide us information about what the plans and intentions of that group was. And then really that's just where it started. At that point, we then had to validate that information, make sure it was legitimate, make sure they weren't trying to set us up for any double agent operations. So we would validate that information with a whole lot of different sources, whether it was data coming from sensors, satellites, and other disparate sources, in order to make sure that they were telling the truth, and then use that data to look at what were the trends. What are some of the anomalies in the data of what was going on in a foreign country so that we could actually see the terrorist activity and stop it before it occurred? And that's the background that I had. I mean, my job day in and day out was to go and recruit these folks to give us information to keep America safe. And I did that all the way up until, a few years ago when I really had this entrepreneurial itch that I knew I wanted to do something else. And that's when I started looking. But yeah, that's the background in terms of when I reached out. It was probably soon after I had left, was really interested in this freight space, but I didn't know a thing about it. And the first place I went to was actually reading media articles and then listening to podcasts. And Freight 360 was the first podcast that I double clicked on, downloaded every episode, and just started listening. Because what I saw was 2 trends that were going on. I mean, it's always had high fragmentation in the market, but you guys started talking about fraud. We just talked about double brokering a few seconds ago, and was just listening to how much was going on there. And it almost like sparked that same like almost righteous vengeance that I had 20 years ago after 9/11, where I was like, how dare someone, defraud someone, steal something, and all this for people that are just trying to do good work out there day in and day out. And I knew that I had a special set of skills and a team that we could bring to bear to actually start to take a chunk out of this. I don't think I truly realized at the time just how much more we could do with the approach that we were about to take. But yeah, that's the background on me coming out of the CIA.
That's awesome, man. Really cool story, and I'm glad there's folks like you that have the passion to fix the problems that exist, and at least go down a path that'll help address them. So, and we're going to dig into GenLogs and how it works and some exciting news from you guys. Ben, you got anything else you want to add in?
Not really. I remember when he first reached out, I remember calling Nate and where I was standing because I'm like, we have people in companies constantly that reach out and that want to talk to us or want to promote it. And I was like, this was the thing I was more excited about than anything I could even remember. I remember telling Nate, I'm like, Nate, like this is going to work. And I'm like, based on how they're even outlining it. And I'm like, you also get kind of a feel, like you said, like for how people are kind of their abilities to do things, even if it's in a brief time. And I'm like, not only do I think this is going to work, but like I think they can actually pull off what they want to do. And I remember just being super excited that day when I was talking to Nate about it, because I'm like, this could absolutely fit. I hesitate to use the word fix, right? But could absolutely impact, right, this giant issue that nobody seems to be doing anything about. That it's like plaguing the entire industry. And no one's coming to save us. Like we've talked about this, Ryan and I've worked a lot over the few years. Like no one's coming along. There isn't nobody you can call. You can't call your local police. Like there isn't any place that is coming to save the industry or to do anything about this.
Totally. So let's kind of get into GenLogs. Ben, you got a nice little hat on there. I didn't think to put any GenLogs gear on today, but Ryan, take us through what is GenLogs. I mean, obviously Ben and I know, and I've been starting to see way more traffic about you guys on LinkedIn and Twitter and whatnot, or X lately. Love to see what's going on, but get everyone up to speed on what GenLogs is, how you guys are addressing these issues. I think it's really cool, and you guys have come so far in such a small amount of time if you look at it. But take us through that.
Yeah, I'll kind of give you the wave tops, then we can dive a little bit deeper. So just from a general perspective, what GenLogs is doing is we are actually deploying ourselves these sensors all along major interstates and highways. So we're building a nationwide network of these roadside sensors that each one of these have 3 cameras that allows us to collect on the front, side, and rear of every passing truck and equipment pairing. And then we use AI in real time to extract everything, every data and shred of data that you can about what you're seeing. Like I always like to explain it, if you as an experienced, someone that's worked in freight for a while can pull out little details, we can train a computer vision model to do so. So from the get-go, we started training on pulling out like make, model, USDOT, MC numbers, cab numbers, VINs if they're available. But then we've started getting into a whole lot of niche equipment types. So breaking that down, just going beyond just, hey, is it a dry van, reefer, but getting into like what type of RGN is it? If you're looking for a 13 axle, extendable, low boy, whatever it might be, we are then training models on that. We're getting the logos, the equipment numbers as well. We extract all of that out, and then we essentially just build out a big tapestry for how truck patterns move around the United States in a way that is like hundreds and thousands of times more data than FMCSA is able to deliver with inspections. In fact, just this morning, my team pulled some updated facts and figures. Over the last month, we've seen 4,000 unique carriers on the roads, and we've seen them multiple times. These are 4,000 carriers that have never had an FMCSA inspection. And so they're out there day in and day out, running certain lanes, trying to build book of business, as well as build credibility of running lanes, and they've never been inspected. And I think I've either heard it in your show and others. I've certainly talked to owner and operators that express some frustration in terms of like, hey, I just got my authority. I'm now running there, and brokers won't work with me unless I have X number of inspections or a year of my authority in certain inspections. And we're seeing these carriers, a lot of untapped dark capacity in the roads every single day. Well, the other thing we're seeing, or maybe it's the lack of what we're seeing, is the double brokers that actually don't have assets on the roads, that maybe bought an MC, they're bidding on load boards or reaching out about certain loads, but when it comes to their actually seeing their assets on the roads, we're not seeing that. And so we're kind of playing 2 ways. We're playing offense and defense with this sensor network in order to see who's out there that no one knows that they're out there, but then who's not out there that's claiming that they are. And it's 2 sides of the same coin. There's a whole lot more that we're able to do once we start to track these trucks over time and then fuse together their locations with other data sets. You get a really rich tapestry of OD pairings, and we get to then extrapolate what shipper lanes are from that. So for those that are, maybe you're listening to the podcast here, you just got your brokerage authority, just trying to figure out and build your book of business, but you're wondering like, literally, where do I go to make that first cold call to a shipper? And how can I understand more about them to understand what their needs are? Well, GenLogs on our freight intelligence platform has also the lane data for about 250,000 shippers across the United States. What are their inbound and outbound lanes, volumes, and needs there? And so it's a great starting place that primarily 3PLs, these brokers is who we've built this platform for. It helps them with customers, carriers, and then compliance as well, because God forbid anything ever does go wrong, you got caught by a double broker, and then now that trailer loaded with valuable cargo is now somewhere in the roads, and you're like desperately looking for it, trying to figure out who stole it, who took it.
Have you fallen victim to double brokering, cargo theft, or identity theft? Quickscope stands out as the only load-level fraud protection tool available today. Unlike any other solution on the market, Quickscope is deployed post-agreement between shippers or brokers and carriers. Shippers can rest assured that their cargo remains secure. Brokers can confidently confirm the identity of the individuals on site for pickup, and carriers can trust that they'll receive timely payment. Start your free trial with Quickscope today by visiting them online at quickscope.com. That's QUIKSKOPE.com. Blue Book Services is the resource you need if you're transporting fresh produce or lumber. Their online databases contain thousands of companies throughout the produce and lumber industry supply chains. You can easily search their databases to generate new sales leads. Blue Book's credit ratings help you avoid companies with high credit risk, and their team can help resolve disputed loads. To learn more, go to producebluebook.com or lumberbluebook.com and click Join Today.
Well, we have the ability to go ahead and set a real-time alert and search historically through all of the trucks and the equipment that we've ever seen on the roads, but then set an alert going forward that as soon as that asset is seen, then it triggers an alert to us. We can share it with the customer, or if you're a customer of GenLogs, you can do it directly and then find who is pulling that equipment. So there's just a lot that this unlocks. Now, it's not easy. We've gone through a lot of iterations of getting this sensor network out there. We've also spent millions of dollars to do it, but it's really important in order to get a full pulse of what carriers are out there, what are they doing in a way that you've never been able to have before. And it completely opens up especially as capacity hopefully starts to constrict here pretty soon, because that means the market's starting to shift back in the right direction. Well, now you have at your fingertips hundreds of thousands of carriers and data on what the lanes they run, the equipment they have, all of that right at your fingertip, thanks to this nationwide network of sensors.
So let me ask you a couple of questions on the stats around this. So
sure.
You mentioned the sensors. How many sensors do you guys have up around the U.S.? How many trucks are you actually pulling a day? Just talk through a little bit of that, because I think it's pretty fascinating with the reach that you guys truly have already.
Sure. On the number of sensors and locations, I always kind of explain it. I love my mom to death, and I would literally take a bullet for her, but I will never tell her two things: the names of my assets that I was running at the CIA and the locations and the number of sensors that we have out there. And that's really to protect our network, is that, we don't want the bad actors to know, hey, we only have to get this many of them, and then all of a sudden we take out the GenLogs network, because we are stopping bad actors every single day and keep letting the good guys flourish. The other thing about that is, if you don't know where they are, how many there are, you have to assume they're everywhere. And all of a sudden you now have to decide, are you going to take a risk to steal that trailer that's unattended at this lot or out at a truck stop and try to make it down the road? And I will tell you, I've told some of our investors who live by some of our sensors exactly the stretch of highway they're on, and they will drive down looking for them and they will not see them, because we've built these to blend in with the environment, and we built them to see what is actually happening on the roads. What I will say is that we're infusing a whole lot more capital before putting more sensors out there over this next calendar year. By about this time next year, we will see on a daily basis 90% or more of the trucks on the road daily, and we'll see them 2 or more times. And we have, when you look at like a map of the United States, from like Texas up to Wisconsin to the East Coast, we have really heavy coverage over there. And then starting now on the West Coast and kind of working to meet in the middle, we have some heavy coverage there as well. Some of the like mountain regions, we're still filling in some of the gaps there. But for the most part, it is really rare that you would search for either a specific asset or a carrier and not see a whole ton of data about that in our platform thus far.
Hey, I can respect that response. Right, you gotta make sure that your I guess your secrets are held close to the chest. Ben, you got anything you want to add in on how it's set up?
The two things. The one is, he was mentioning before about, basically carriers being held at some disadvantage over something they cannot control, right? So what used to be the only metric for whether or not a carrier could be a bad actor or legitimate, as you point out, were like inspections. It's not because they were a good indicator. It's because they were the only indicator available, right? And the thing that I found comical, we've all talked about this, is like clients that I work with that have trucking companies that are like, we are trying to get inspections. We've literally called the FMCSA and said, can you send someone to inspect us? And this is what at least 3 of my clients have been told the exact same thing. If you're calling, we know you don't need inspected and we have limited resources, so we can't send anybody. And they're like, but we can't get any more business because everyone holds it against us because you haven't inspected us. And they're like, sorry, we just don't have enough people to do this. So like the fact that you're asking it is an indicator that you don't need it and we're not going to send anybody. So they're at this huge disadvantage. Everybody's using a metric that isn't really applicable because they're random and based on where these trucks run, like they just might not run into inspections that often over a given year, right? And then on the other side, right, like that's lost capacity for brokers, right? Not only is it that we're not utilizing them, but I want to be like real specific because it's not just that like you can't find another truck in this current market to pick up that load. But the thing that you don't get to do that I've been able to do since the product's been built, because I've been able to work with you guys on it, is that like I can go and find carriers that are running lanes that are like in very obscure areas where it's really hard to get a truck. And here's what that actually means to a brokerage, right? So yes, I can still get a truck to pick that load up for my customer. But guess what that means? If I use a traditional source like a load board or even just a carrier sourcing tool like RMIS or even Highway, for example, they all just pull off of inspection data. Some have a little bit of ELDs and you get some better information, but most of the time when you're covering a load in a very rural area that doesn't have a lot of capacity density because there's not a lot of freight coming out of there, you're deadheading a driver there is your first option. So you're paying more money to get a guy to go there first to pick up the load. So you're already inefficient, both to your shipper and to the carrier and to the broker, meaning you make less money. The carrier isn't a good fit for it anyways. They don't really want it, but you got to pay them to do it. And then the shipper oftentimes has to wait for the delay to get the guy into that town. The thing that happens when you find the carriers that are already there, and that's what we've seen, like being able to see the back end of how many carriers are in these places. I was shocked at how many of them, because like you can't see them. Like you can't see them in any other tool out there. And then when we're pulling this stuff out of GenLogs and looking at them, like there's 1,000 carriers that have run this lane. And then you start talking to them like, yeah, I'm there every week. I got 3 guys there, one Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday every week. When's your load picking up? And the reality is I think in the face, it just seems like, oh, well, then they're cheaper and you make more money. But it's not just that. And that is one for sure benefit. Because when you have the right fit to the right carrier, they're literally delivering and sometimes picking up their backhaul across the street or down the road in the same zip code, which is better for the carrier, right? It saves money for the shipper. And then like the third benefit is they're much more likely to be like, hey, can I run that load every week? Now I'm going back to my customer and going, hey, this really worked very well for ABC Transport. They're literally delivering in your backyard these 3 days of the week. What other days do you need to move this? Oh, we move it 2 days a week. Great. Can we get them set up with us and you guys so that like we can run this every week? Now that shipper also isn't sending that load out to get recovered by a different carrier, which has risk, which costs more money, which takes everybody more time. And the carrier wins because the carrier's not bouncing out of the load board, grabbing a random load 300 miles away just to not drive empty. it's like a win across the industry. It's creating efficiency, less miles driven for the carriers, less, I mean, we've talked about this too. Less, I mean, eventually, like if you keep finding efficiencies, that's less miles driven by trucks, which is less carbon going into the ozone. Like when you're making the
Yeah.
entire supply chain more efficient, everybody wins.
So I remember a few years ago, I had a conversation with someone, and they're like, what would be the optimal way to optimize freight brokerage and tendering of loads to trucks to reduce empty miles? And I was like, well, you need to know where every single truck is on the road at any given point in time, and that'll never happen. And then I see GenLogs, and I'm like, wait a second, it's pretty damn close to what I was joking about a few years ago. But it is very impressive because it's real time data. And Ryan, you told us a story. I don't know. It was within the last year. I think it was like maybe it was like Pepsi or Coke that was missing a trailer or something, and you were able to find it. Can you tell us a story for our audience that just kind of describes real world example the power of GenLogs and what it can do in real time to help locate the location of an asset?
Sure, yeah. I was attending the Manifest conference back in February in Vegas, and we were standing outside the exhibit hall, and I look over and I see there's a Fortune 50 shipper there. And I was like, let me go and talk. I was still new to the industry here and still had enough humility to be like, I certainly do not know it all. So I'm learning from everyone at that point in time. So I go over and start striking up a conversation, and I could just see their eyes light up when I'm telling them what we're doing. At that time, we really only had a handful of sensors on the roads, but I'm walking them through like, yep, our technology does this. We're able to catalog every single truck and equipment pairing as it comes by for immediate recall. Well, we, exchange cards, bid farewell, and go into the conference. And, what you expect at these conferences, especially if you're a vendor, is you're never going to hear from a potential customer at that point in time. But I got home, and lo and behold, the day after the conference, I get an email into my inbox from this Fortune 50 shipper saying, hey, we're kind of like skeptical that you can actually do this. We want to put it to the test. Here are 10 trailers that are missing. High priority, these are leased trailers for the shipper. Can you go ahead and see what you can track down? Well, I was on the midst of a Zoom call. As soon as I got off, I took that first trailer, dropped it in our data, and boom, we had a hit right away. And I was like, so giddy. I went ahead and pulled all the images, shot it back, and it was about 5 minutes from when that shipper had asked for us to search these carriers to when I shot them back like, hey, it was just seen yesterday on I-81 southbound in Pennsylvania. Here are the images associated with it. And they were like shocked, blown away. Especially because this is a trailer that they had been leasing that had been missing for 36 months, 3 years. And they'd been paying on it because they couldn't track it down and hoping that it would just surface. And then we were able to find it. They were able to then work to recover it and stop paying that lease. And that has happened now weekly. It's a story every week. In fact, we're helping recover about 25 trailers or pieces of equipment every single week is what we're on an average now across our customer base. And by the way, that is not even the core of what we're doing, which is why we've been pretty excited to share the news this week with the industry about what now GenLogs is going to offer to everyone.
Yeah, so let's get right into that then. So what you're at going to the F3 conference this week. This will be releasing on Friday. So this probably people have seen the news, but talk us through what's the big latest and greatest with GenLogs. What are you guys doing?
The big announcement here is that we've decided at GenLogs that we're going to make a lot of money helping brokers and others down the road with regards to capacity shippers and all that. What we don't need to make money on is helping clean up the fraud and theft in the industry. And so effective immediately, GenLogs will help investigate and help recover all stolen or missing equipment or assets for the entire industry for free. And when I say that, we mean it, is we have a full-time team now, our investigations team is standing by, that the moment you realize that a truck, trailer, anything is stolen, I don't care if you're a shipper, you're a 3PL broker, you're a carrier, you can reach out to us through our website, genlogs.io, or shoot us an email at investigations@genlogs.io, GenLogs. And we will immediately start to track that down for. We'll do a search historically. When's the last time we've seen it? If we haven't seen it since it was stolen, then we'll put an alert on it for you. And we're going to find it. We're going to track it down. We're going to give you the data on it. We'll even try to connect you with law enforcement to then recover it. And we're not going to send you a bill, is the bottom line. We're not going to, we're not going to ask for a red cent from you, especially because when we actually think about it, like my heart are with the owner operators out there that maybe have put like all of their life savings into grabbing that like one reefer trailer, one, dry van, flatbed, whatever it might be. And if that is stolen, they're at their lowest low. And like, you don't kick a man when they're down. In fact, you extend a helping hand. And that's what we've decided at GenLogs. We want to be a force for good for the industry. Our mission is to remove the bad actors so that the good guys can flourish. And at the end of the day, this is a really easy way for us. Like we put the millions of dollars out there to build this infrastructure. There's going to be, we have the platform, freight intelligence platform, that there's a ton of customers love it and people will continue to get on that and we'll be just fine. What we can do right now is to offer to anyone, if something goes wrong, you have free Overwatch coming from GenLogs, and we're not going to send you an invoice. We're just going to help you.
Man, that's awesome. So I think about like two real world situations that most brokers, myself included, have dealt with and probably will continue to deal with, which that'll be a help, is the hostage loads or rerouted loads that are with intent to steal, right? Like I've seen it where a bad actor broker will con some owner operator into delivering a shipment to a warehouse when it's actually supposed to go somewhere else, and then it gets stolen and sold on black market or exported. And then there's the hostage loads where trucks going down the road and you're debating with them on detention or some kind of accessorial pay, and they're like, I'm not going to deliver this until you pay me an extra whatever, right? So this is the kind of stuff that the bigger the company, the more often you're going to deal with it. And there hasn't been a centralized place to go. Like we've talked with other experts in the past on their best practices, how to handle this stuff, but a full service at no cost to help the industry for good. I mean, it's unprecedented. We had nothing like that or even close to that in history. So we appreciate that.
Again, what did the FMCSA say in the fall? Like, call your local police, basically, right? And it's like,
it's funny because this was at the policy forum in DC that the TIA held, and someone asked the question like, hey, if we run into like a stolen load or a hostage load, what advice do you give us? And it was a panel from the FMCSA, and their literal response was, we really encourage you to have a good relationship with your local law enforcement, and when they come to do an annual inspection with the fire marshal or whatnot, get to know them and be kind of buddy. That way, when you need a hand, they know who you are, and it's not the first time that they're talking with you. And I'm like, it's the wrong answer. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not giving any real guidance there, FMCSA. But
and the thing is, like, at the end of the day, I know law enforcement wants to do something about it. They just don't have the resources nor the evidence, like to actually pin something on someone and track it down. And now we do. And I'll give you like a great anecdote. The other day, we had a very large 3PL reach out to us with another leased trailer that they suspected had been stolen. They were just wondering if we could help them track it down. So I threw it in our asset locator tool. Immediately we saw that it had been in the hands of two different carriers over the last few weeks. And I actually reached out to Benjamin about this one because what was interesting about this, it was two separate carriers separated by a few weeks. But when I looked at the carriers, they were both domiciled within about 20 minutes of each other in Southern California. And then furthermore, I was looking at the license plates on these trucks, and they must have been issued literally within minutes or days of each other. They were almost sequential. And there was really nothing, like, it just kind of seemed strange until we looked back in time and saw that both of them had shared a phone number at one point in time. So now you had like two different carriers very close to each other, sharing a phone number on a presumed stolen trailer out there on the roads. And, even then we were just kind of watching what was happening. But literally, as more sensors are seeing this trailer transit, we see it with a third carrier out there. And then there was some suspicious activity regarding these carriers. What it really seemed to be was a small network of carriers that were pooling these stolen or misused, at least, trailers out there, and that 3PL would have no recourse before. Who are you going to talk to when it comes to law enforcement? What's law enforcement going to do? But I actually did reach out to law enforcement in this case because it was in LA County, and said, hey, here's the evidence here. You have visual evidence of these carriers hauling this, and now you can get down to the bottom of it. And the other thing that Benjamin said earlier that I did want to circle back on is, like, again, my heart is with the owner operators out there, those that are really putting their life on the line here, like at least the providing for their family by being out there every day. A few months ago, we had another incident where a broker reaches out to us, kind of, hey, we just had this load stolen, and it's really odd because it seems to have been stolen by someone that's been in our carrier network, highly vetted, never had an issue with before. So I was like, well, let's take a look. So I threw their DOT MC in our asset locator tool, pulled up all of the trucks that we had seen associated with that DOT MC over the last few months. And I think we had at that point 6 of them. And it was like a white Freightliner, a blue Peterbilt, or whatever, which kind of went down the line. And so I gave that list to the broker. The broker called the carrier and was like, hey, you're telling me you didn't steal our load, and I tend to believe you. I've worked with you long enough, but let's just go over the latest state of your power units out on the road. And they started going down the line. They got to the 6th one, and he said, well, what about a blue Volvo? What about your blue Volvo? And the carrier's like, we do not have a blue Volvo. He's like, you sure? Because there's a blue Volvo with your DOT MC running around. That's the one that ended up stealing this load. And the carrier was like, that is not us. And sure enough, some fraudulent thief carrier was out there that had just put that MC placard on the side of someone else, and they were stealing loads all around the East Coast. Well, those Freight Guard and TIA watchdog reports are being now filed against a carrier that has no idea that someone is fraudulently representing them on the roads and stealing these loads. And we now had visual evidence to show that a power unit that was not owned by this carrier was now stealing these loads, and help resolve some of those Freight Guard reports that really would have tarnished his reputation and absolutely crushed his livelihood. And so I think that's what I'm most proud of the team, and the outcropping of what we built here is an actual capability to keep the bad actors out, but actually exonerate the good actors that are getting they're getting mixed up a lot in some of these tools that are out there that are, evaluating carriers on.
Yeah, the identity theft thing is huge. Like,
it is
literally, you're punishing someone who doesn't need
victim.
to be punished. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the thing that honestly, like, I'm probably more excited about than anything is, like, well, we work with lots of trucking companies too, obviously. And just like Nate said, it's like they're a victim of identity theft, right? Because they got phished. Somebody in their company made a phishing email. Somehow they get hacked, right? And then now, not only do they have to deal with that, but on top of that, now they got a report, which is basically a flag above their business that says, hey, warning. So then every broker then tries to find a different carrier because they can't necessarily vet it, right? And it's all just what you said at the very beginning. The whole industry is opaque. There's a lack of transparency into what is actually happening. And it's not that I think those products or tools or reports had any bad intentions, right? They're just unintended consequences of the best thing that they had. And they're subjective, right? They're people's opinions of situations. Sometimes it might just be a disgruntled broker. Sometimes it is legitimate. Sometimes it is a crime. But there's almost no way to tell what actually occurred. And again, it's not that law enforcement doesn't want to do these things. They don't have enough resources to go. The FBI can't go and, investigate every $5,000, instance of fraud, or even $20,000, right? So there's just not enough information or the ability to do anything about this. And everybody hurts, right? And I don't care who you are, everybody's paying this cost, right? Shippers are paying for it, brokers pay for it, and carriers pay for it. And the friction in the business, to me, it reminds me very much of like when I would see movies and documentaries of like why the FBI started in the first place related to like wire fraud and the mob. They would just literally go across state line and they couldn't get chased, right? And they realized, oh, the criminals have gotten ahead of where we're able to actually chase them to. And to me, our industry has been like the Wild West in a sense, where it's like, I mean, there's literally nothing. Nobody's coming after them. Nobody can find them, and nobody knew that it happened. All you have are the victims at the end of the day going, Well, there was another 20 grand we lost. Oh, that shipment apparently got stolen by maybe this company. Oh, it wasn't really that company. We still don't know who actually stole it, but it went through this company. So let's put a report on them. And now they're being punished. And it's just a very ineffective way at addressing what is systemic and hundreds of millions of dollars a year in losses.
Yeah, I want to ask a couple more questions on the freight intelligence platforms. I know we just talked about how to solve the fraud problem a little bit here, but I have played around. I got up on my other screen here too, just to kind of refresh myself. But I played around on there, and it's amazing. Like the user interface, you could search for carriers based on a lane, search for shippers based off a certain lane. Can you talk a little bit, obviously not revealing any of your secrets, like I asked you how many sensors you had, and I clearly pressed the wrong button there, but can you talk a little bit through the process of how you guys are able to take the data you have and analyze it to recommend a carrier based on a lane or a shipper, right? If I'm trying to find a backhaul for one of my drivers, how is this all coming together to help give us the output of, hey, check out these carriers, here's how we're going to rank them, and check out these shippers, here's how we rank them?
Yeah, sure. So what I can say without getting too much into kind of the how the sausage is made is we go back to my days at the intelligence community where really the reason the US intelligence community just kicked butt more than any other country in the world is we've really figured out how to take an all source intelligence perspective. That we will take data coming from human sources, that's human. We'll take data coming from geospatial sources, satellites above, that's geoint. Then we'll take like signals intelligence, SIGINT, and bring all of this together to really look at from every single angle what's happening. And that's how you kind of you kind of think about it like two-factor authentication. Like there is no doubt that this thing or person was at a time and place because all of the signals point to that being the case. Well, we take the similar approach by using our sensor network solely as the foundational freight data layer that we then fuse with a lot of other data sets that we are pulling in. So every week we are finding new sources of novel data. And a lot of this data is anonymized, it's messy. It really, like, for the average person to go in and take a look at it, it would be like, this doesn't make sense to me. And also it's gonna have like your Tesla data in there and your Volvo data and Toyotas and all of this, and it's gonna be really messy. Well, we use our sensor network as the decryption key to essentially take these really messy anonymized data sets and then reattach those data to the actual physical trucks or trailers on the roads. And that allows us to then track from origin to destination and you do that at scale, you kind of aggregate that up. It gets you a really, really rich insight into what's happening at like every shipper and every lane across the United States. And I think like some of my favorite times at GenLogs showcasing the freight intelligence platform will be when I am talking to a shipper about it. And they will say like, well, let's pull up this specific location. And I'll pull up the location, you double click on it, and boom, it shows them their lanes, both like where their suppliers are coming from and also where their outbound lanes are to their customers. And to a T, every time we've shown that, a shipper will look at it and he'll nod and be like, yeah, you nailed it. And that's just like a really cool experience. And the interesting thing has been, you kind of wonder like, what are shippers going to be kind of riled by this? The fact that we are now unveiling all of the data about their lanes there. It's actually been the exact opposite. What we've seen is our customers, 3PLs and brokers who are on the freight intelligence platform will literally walk into their prospective customer, to the shipper, and sit down and they'll pull up the freight intelligence platform. We're totally fine if they want to do that. Because what they're doing is dispelling the myth that all brokers do is post on load boards. They're showing like how they have these unique creative ways to now prospect carriers, and not just to like find a new carrier. That's the start of it. But then the carrier utilization piece is what we're really excited about, is when all of a sudden you have your Rolodex of carriers, you can have them uploaded in GenLogs, and you can literally say, I have a spot load right now that I need to get something from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania down to Nashville, Tennessee. We will tell you all of the carriers within your network that are within 2 hours of Harrisburg right now, that have the right equipment type right now that matches whatever load you need to move, and that likely have a backhaul need down to Nashville based on all of the past data that we bring in. So we bring all of that in. And then this also allows you, when it comes to talking with prospects on the customer side with shippers, to show them like, hey, you just told me that you have these lanes that you need to cover. Let me show you the backhauls on those lanes of other shippers out there that I'm going to be able to now cover freight on those backhauls for you and ultimately drop your overall costs if you go with me as the broker. So it's really like the broker empowered by GenLogs is really what is kind of the superpower. In fact, we had one, I won't name him, but he's been in this industry for about 20 years. And he pulled me aside at a conference just the other week. And he said, Ryan, I've been telling everyone 5 years from now, there's going to be two types of brokers, those that are GenLogs customers and those that went out of business. And he is that convinced that it's going to like be that much of a game changer, which is really like humbling for someone that came out from side of the industry. And I've really like, we've gotten to this point only because we've had the humility and empathy to just sit down and ask questions about what's it like for you guys on an everyday basis to do your work. And I've invited like both Nate and Benjamin into literally sit with our product teams and go through like, this is what life is like. And in fact, a huge plug for the course that you guys offer. We now put our employees at GenLogs through the Freight 360 course for brokers to really understand what the day in the life of a broker is. Because I know like your audience kind of skews towards maybe those that are just getting started. And I think what the most significant happenings that occurred over the last few months is when we launched our product in August, we chose one of the largest freight brokerages in the US, top 5 freight brokerage to get onto the platform. And then we went and found a 2-person brokerage that was just hoping to hit $5 million of top line revenue in the next year or two. And really the question was, did we have enough data that the 5th or 6th largest freight brokerage in the US would say, this is something we need? And the answer to that was yes. They converted to become a customer. We've actually just gotten 1,000 more of their users on the last week. We wanted to make sure we had enough data to then also that the now 5-person or the 2-person freight brokerage now literally has data parity with the 5th or 6th largest freight brokerage in the US. They're able to find hundreds of thousands of carriers, hundreds of thousands of shippers, and now has the same parity. So that's what we've really developed as a tool that kind of levels the playing field. So even the underdogs, who I always root for, they can now have that parity.
That's what I love too, is like and Ben, we've talked about it before, where you have the ability as a 1 or 2 person operation to compete with the biggest companies in the industry. And absolutely, with a tool like GenLogs, it does level the playing field. And who's going to come out on top in that situation? It's going to come down to the interpersonal tact. Who can relate to and communicate better? All the non-data related things
Human
that we
skills.
talk about, right? We're leveling the playing field. So now it's like, go do your thing. And whichever one of you is going to be better at building relationships and rapport and trust with this prospective customer, that's who's going to get the business. Because all the tools and all the roadblocks in the way have now been just snow plowed out.
I know. And like, I'll give you like a real example of this, right? So like, I've been able to have both of those seats, right? That Ryan just said. Like, I started a company with 6,000 brokers and had probably as much lane history and carrier base as any other brokerage in the country. Real close, like number 2 maybe at the time. And I've done this with 1 person and I've done this with 2 or 3 people, right? And the biggest disadvantage when you have a small team, say it's just 1 person, right? When I was at like TQL, if I've got a new lane from a customer and they go, I need help with this lane, doesn't matter what it is, especially because where do they always need help? It's always the areas where there's not a lot of trucks, right? So it's, a rural town in Arkansas to Sparks, Nevada or whatever. It's got to pick up in 3 hours. Well, if I'm at TQL or Echo or CH, it's really likely when I look at our lane history that someone has run that lane. Maybe not recently, but at some point. So the biggest advantage of the big company is I can at least call those carriers and have a chance that one of those trucks might be there. But it is no guarantee or even likelihood they're there that day or today, right? But that is your biggest advantage. And in a small company, right, you don't have the lane history. You haven't ran that many loads yet. Or if you're new, right, like you just don't have that history in your TMS. But in GenLogs, I don't care where you give me a load at, I can find the carriers that I know are there and were just there, right? And I've been using it since it's come out. So like I can tell you for sure I've got these lanes with new brokers prospecting new customers that are like, I have the hardest time covering that load. We'll pull lists, send emails, and make phone calls, and we'll have 4 carriers that are delivering there right now. And they're like, yeah, we were there every week. Yeah. And also, again, I talked about this earlier. You aren't paying a premium. It doesn't mean you're beating the truck up and paying them less. It's just you don't pay them deadhead money. So even though in the one lane I had was, I remember because it was like Aurora, California going down to Dallas. And in the summer, all the trucks are in Denver. So you got to pay deadhead money to get the guy from Denver down to Aurora. Well, in this market, that extra $200 to spend on that truck meant I'm now too expensive for my customer and they don't want to pay it. But using GenLogs, we found 4 carriers that were running that every day, and they gave us the actual rate per mile to run from Aurora to Dallas because that's where they were actually delivering. Not a lot of carriers are there every day or every week, but that's why this tool is such an advantage. And then you layer on the next piece, which is, oh, all these other lanes we're delivering to in disparate places. I'm immediately in shipper insights and looking for the other side of that lane and then calling those shippers. So, in the past, brokers would just make this stuff up, be like, oh, yeah, I got a backhaul driver there. And then next week they give you a load and you can't cover it, right? Now we're like actually able to execute on that and say, no, listen, like these are the days of the weeks we're up there. We're already delivering for this other customer. Would this work for you? They're like, yeah, would love to be able to work you into our network. That is real value, right? Like that is real value, again, to your customer, to the brokerage, and to the carrier. And it saves time and it saves everybody money. And you do that little by little, right? Economies of scale outside of that example are no advantage in this industry. That's why you don't see one trucking company becoming the Microsoft or Apple. You don't see one freight broker becoming the Microsoft or the Apple. Even though we all look at these huge companies, they have like 2-3% of the market when you add them all up. All of the huge companies. The whole industry runs basically on small businesses. And to me, like that's the thing that I love about the industry and why I think like we all enjoy being a part of it is because you can work with family owned businesses, one person, somebody that just wants to work harder. Like to me, like that's the opportunity why people came to America for hundreds of years is to be able to go and compete and make a name and create a business for yourself. This is one of the few industries I think left where anybody can literally do this if you're willing to work hard enough and put the time in. Like it's literally sky's the limit.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add in on the sales side is imagine, and Ryan, you did a great job explaining real world situations of how people are using it. But imagine being able to start a conversation with a prospective shipper, already knowing the answer to the majority of questions that you typically have to ask them, like, oh, what's your frequency of shipments? Where are you guys shipping to? You can literally see that in the Freight Intelligence platform. And to your point, if a shipper wants to challenge you on it, the data speaks for itself, right? That's a huge, and same thing with, carrier sourcing as well. Just to echo your point, Ben, because I'm paying somebody less doesn't mean I'm jipping them out. I might be paying a higher dollar amount per mile in an overall lesser rate because we're avoiding the inefficiency of the deadhead, which is good for everybody, right? It's wear and tear on the vehicle that the driver doesn't otherwise need to do. It's empty hauling that could have been used more efficiently. So yeah, this is a win all around. So I hope things do go in that direction for you guys, Ryan. What's the we're getting up towards the tail end here. What's the future, like both near and far range, looking like for you guys? I know the big announcement today was obviously being able to help for free at no cost identify these stolen loads and stolen equipment. But what else is on the horizon?
Yeah, well, one thing is like we're adding about a dozen of these sensors every single week now, and we're hiring more teams to do so. We're actually closing another investment round that should be announced this week or next. That's going to absolutely allow us to flood more of these sensors out there. So part of it is just more sensors equal better data for our customers, no doubt. But the more data we collect, the more we can drill down into that. So some things that I'm looking forward to, I know we have scheduled for later this year or early next, is doing some more on the advanced shipper insights. So imagine being able to see what the average dwell time is for every shipper in the US, as well as what days of the week they are shipping, so that you can know, hey, they're shipping Tuesdays, Thursdays, these other guys on the back hauls, Wednesday, Fridays, like whatnot. So we're getting like days of the week, dwell times, getting different types of volumes, and then starting to associate the equipment types to the shippers as well. So like, hey, what type of like Conestoga do I need for this shipper ahead of time? Literally to have all of that at your fingertips. Some of this is going to take a little time. That's absolutely where we're going. On On the carrier side, it's just literally understanding like how they are operating and frankly allowing you to find them a whole lot more efficiently than if you guys are like two ships in the night trying to post on load boards and then both of you like just worried about like, am I going to be defrauded here? Ideally, we like to talk about it as like the old way is a spray and pray. That you're like, I'm just putting it out there and hoping that someone that's not going to steal my freight is responding. And now we're almost like putting a sniper rifle in your hand and saying like, find the exact right carrier at the right time, right place, right equipment needs, right backhaul, all of that. And that's what we want to put in your hands. And I think like one of the most flattering comments that almost everyone that when they actually touch the system says is it's like brokering freight in cheat mode. Kind of going back to like the old days when we used to grow up playing video games, and we've tried to make this UI in a way that, yeah, exactly, yeah, up, down, left, right, there you go. And
BA.
You got it. But that's what we want that to ultimately feel like. We want it to, you still have to, like, at the end of the day, we're not removing humans from this on either side. I think that's a critical piece is we're a human first AI company. At the end of the day, we're going to help you find who you need to call, but we're going to, you still need to call. You still need to form those relationships with shippers. You still need to form those deep personal relationships with the carriers. We're just going to help you get there a whole lot quicker. And that's really the background. My time in the intelligence community was to like deliver data and insights to make decisions a whole lot quicker and make better decisions. And that's what we want to put in everyone's hand.
Love it. Well, that's awesome. We appreciate you being on here. So best way for folks to get a hold of you if they want to check out GenLogs.
Yeah, go to our website, genlogs.io, genlogs.io. Literally, you can book a demo right on the website. We will show you like a full 30-minute in-depth experience there. And we offer, at least for the foreseeable future, a risk-free trial option. So you can get on the platform, you can use it for 30 days, you can see exactly what it can do for you, and then make a decision about whether you want to stay with it long-term. I will note this, and I hate to... What we want to always make sure is that we're giving very high caliber of service ourselves as a company. So we are limiting to only 200 customers total on this platform through the end of 2025. And those slots are really accelerating in terms of picking up. Once we reach 200, that is it. So there will only be 200 brokers out there that have this superpower. And so, there's not, it's more so that we want to make sure we can scale efficiently. And we do a white glove onboarding for every single customer to make sure they understand the full capabilities there. And so once you get on, you are one of 200 that'll have this and no one else will, which also gives you an advantage over everyone else in the market.
Totally. Love it. I'm super excited to see where you guys, how you guys progress in the coming years and to walk alongside you guys through that. So we'll definitely have you back on in the future, talk about how things are going. And I'm curious to see the real impact that we'll have from you guys offering that service to the community with the stolen assets and whatnot. So, but Ryan Joyce from GenLogs, thanks for being with us today. Enjoy yourself at the conference this week. I heard it's supposed to be a good one. But anything else before we wrap this up that you want to share?
Go Bills.
I love it. Ben, what do you got?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, like Ryan said, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.